All right, we got to the episode. I want to finish up Parsha Vayeishev today because a couple of fundamentals over here. Number one is the situation of Yehuda and Tamar. We didn't speak about it last time, right? We got where we got into. And the whole situation over here where Yehuda gets married, he has two sons, he has three sons, and then his first son marries a woman named Tamar, and he wastes his seed because he doesn't want to mar her beauty, and then he dies. Then the second son marries her for Yibum, and he dies because he doesn't want to produce a memory for the brother, so he dies. The third son, Yehuda, is not anxious to have him marry Tamar because he's concerned that she's a killer. So he doesn't want to. So he tells her, just wait till Shelah gets older. In the meantime, Tamar decides that she wants to have children from this family. Somehow she has a premonition that it's going to be a good thing. And she goes and she waits at a crossroads dressed like a harlot. And Yehuda and Tamar, the Medrash says that Yehuda meets Tamar at the crossroads, and she communicates to him that she's not a nida, she's immersed in a mikveh, and she's pure, and that they live together. And he sends her, she says, what do you pay me for now the Medrash says that obviously this is being manipulated by God, and he had an increased level of desire supernaturally so that he would live with her, because this is eventually going to begin the Messianic line. The Messianic line comes from this union. And the Zohar actually says that the Malach, the angel, pushed him, which is not an excuse anybody could use nowadays. That was a one-time phenomenon. But whatever it was, it's obviously something that in the end, with hindsight, we're going to see that it was okay because it's a Messianic line. Mashiach wouldn't be coming from something that's absolutely forbidden. So the Messianic, we're going to see that in hindsight it was okay. Now, what happens? What's unique about this situation is that he doesn't recognize her. And that's why I want you to look at the pasuk. Take a look when she sees that. Pick it up on page 210. So it says, she hears that Yehuda is on his way. It was a celebration day because he went to shear the wool off his sheep. Apparently on shear sheeping day or sheep shearing day was a celebration because you're making money. You see how much it's apparently a financial thing. So everybody, they were the good mood. The Medrash said they saw it had a celebration. So on page 210 it says, fourth line from the top, Vayireha Yehuda, Vayachsheveha lezona. Yehuda saw her, and he thought she was a harlot. Ki chisisa paneha, because her face was covered. Now that makes no sense at all, because most harlots don't cover their faces. So why would he think she's a harlot because her face was covered? To the contrary, if her face was covered, she's a Beis Yaakov girl, not a harlot. So why would he think? So the Medrash says, and Rashi brings down, that he didn't recognize her. Her face was uncovered. Leave that door open. Do me a favor. Please swing that door all the way open. Thanks. The Medrash says he didn't recognize her even though her face was uncovered. Obviously, if she's a harlot, her face is uncovered. But he doesn't recognize her because her face was covered when she was his daughter-in-law in his house. She was so modest when she was his daughter-in-law, she always had her face covered. He never even saw his daughter-in-law. Now, when he sees her, he doesn't recognize that it's his former daughter-in-law because her face is exposed. Obviously, my daughter-in-law wouldn't be running around with her face exposed if she was such a sanua. So the last thing on his mind is that this is his former daughter-in-law. Now, so he solicits her, and she says, "What do you give me? What's the payment?" He says, "Well, I'll send you a goat as a payment." She says, "Okay, what do you give me as a security?" So he said, "What do you want?" So she says, "Give me your staff and your signet ring and your cloak, your cape, or whatever it is, your cloak or your cape, however it's translated. That's what I'll take as a security." So he gives the security, and they live together. She leaves, and then he sends the goat to go pay. He sends with his friend to go pay her the goat, and she's not there. She's not around. Nobody knows where she is. Nobody even they even asked, was there a harlot around her? No, we don't have any harlot. No, we would have known if there was. And nobody knows anything. Okay, so he says, I guess she'll keep it. That's all. Now, 3 months later, word comes to him that his daughter-in-law is pregnant. She's starting to show. We know that a woman shows after 3 months. That's when a woman starts to show. Your daughter-in-law is pregnant. So he says, okay, they have a Beis Din, and he sentenced her to death. She has to be burned. Why? Because she's obviously committed an act of immorality. She was waiting to marry his son in a form of Yibum, and she jumped the gun. She was, obviously with some other man, because now she's pregnant, which is an act of immorality. So she's pregnant with twins. As she's being taken out, she sends these items, and she says, the man these items belong to is the father. She's naming Yehuda in a paternity suit. Now, there are two choices here. You can either turn around and say, get out of here. What are you talking about? And not let anybody know. Obviously, she did it on the sly. She sent it to Yehuda in a way that nobody else would know that she's sending it. Everybody recognized Yehuda's signet ring, so they all know that it's his garment. Everybody knows that. So she did it in a very discreet way. And he has two choices. He could either just ignore it, or he could publicly announce, I am the father. You know what kind of strength of character that takes? That's why he becomes the king. That's why he's descendants of the king. Because he's got the ability to go, he rules over himself. He rules over himself. He's able to go and say, yes, it's me, to embarrass himself in public and say, yes, I am the father, which was a legitimate union. Because in the ancient world, they also did yibum, or any near relative who did the yibum. Yibum is when the husband dies without children. So in the ancient world, they did yibum even if it wasn't the brother. And even later on, after this, before the Torah was given, after the Torah was given, we see that a gentleman take chumash. If everybody needs a chumash, please follow. You can follow inside, page 210. We see later on with Boaz and Ruth, when Ruth's husband dies, so there's a whole debate which next of kin is going to marry her. Now they're not brothers. It's not yibum by the letter of the law, but there was a custom that the next closest relative would then marry her to produce the body for the neshama of the deceased. However yibum works. Okay, so at that point, Yehuda says, "I'm the father." What about her? Now, she's sentenced to death by burning, by fire. And she makes up her mind, if he admits, fine, otherwise I'm ready to die. And the Gemara says, based on this, Noach lo la'adam, better for a person to go into a fire than to embarrass somebody in public. She wasn't willing to embarrass him in public. There's actually a debate among the commentaries whether or not you have to give up your life for this, whether it's a halachic statement. In other words, we know that you have to give up your life for the three, idol worship, immorality, and murder. If I say to you, worship idols or I'll kill you, then you have to give up your life. Same thing with immorality, same thing with murder. What about if I say to you, embarrass him, pull his pants down in public, or I'll kill you? Do you have to actually halachically give up your life, or is it a more of a musar concept? You know how bad it is to embarrass somebody in public? Better you should burn in a fire than embarrass somebody in public. So there's actually a debate among the commentaries. Our commentaries say it's actually halachic, that you'd have to give up your life rather than embarrass somebody in public. And one of the reasons is when you embarrass somebody in public, then it's like you're killing them. That's what the Gemara says when you're spilling his blood. When you embarrass somebody in public, you're spilling his blood. The Gemara says, you're malbin pnei chavero, you whiten his face. Now, when we think of embarrassment, what do you associate with? What color does the face turn when you embarrass somebody?
White. Red.
Actually, red. They turn beet red. But before they turn beet red, what happens is, at the instant of embarrassment, the blood drains from the face. That's the whitening his face. Then it rushes back in. That's why we associate terms turning red. But the first stage is the blood drains from a person's face. That's called whitening his face. So there is actually an opinion that from a halachic point of view, you actually have to let somebody you have to die rather than embarrass somebody. Now, I want to show you something which is a theme that repeats itself in the Torah numerous times. We've spoken about it in the past, but it's a remarkable concept. Avram Avinu, what was the trait of Avram Avinu? Did we speak about this last time? Did we mention this last time? Chesed. Did we speak about this last time? Okay, so Avram Avinu's trait is chesed. All right, let's take a look at the life of Avram Avinu. This is the man of kindness. He abandons his elderly father. He throws his nephew out of the house. He gets involved in a world war. He throws his son out of the house. He commits an act of self-mutilation on himself and his entire household, and he takes a knife to the neck of his second son. He's the man of chesed. That's the man of kindness. Yitzchak is din. What's din? Strict justice. His name means laughter. He entertains his wife. He tolerates the wayward son. And when the Plishtim come and they make a false claim against him, he actually gives in to them. Everything the opposite what you expect of din, strict justice, exactly the opposite. Yaakov Avinu is what midah? Anybody know what's that? The pasuk says Torah, which is also emes. Titain emes liYaakov. Well, Yaakov's the man of truth. Deceives his brother, deceives his father, deceives his brother again, deceives his father-in-law. Everywhere you touch Yaakov, there's a deception. Isn't that amazing? What an amazing, it's a pattern, interesting pattern. So here comes Tamar. So the Gemara says, any what do you call it? A daughter-in-law who's sanua, who's modest in her father-in-law's home, so she's going to have kings and prophets that descend from her. Where do we see that from? From Tamar. Yeah, well, if she's so sanua, by nature she was very, very modest and sanua. Well, standing at a crossroads like a harlot doesn't sound sanua to me. Interesting, right? And the same thing happens by Ruth and Boaz. Look what happens by Ruth and Boaz. Ruth, how did Boaz notice Ruth to begin with? He goes out to the field where all the poor people are gathering up the fallen grains. And Boaz is looking around the field and says, hey, who's that young lady over there? The Gemara says, Boaz? Boaz is asking about women? Boaz is the head of the Sanhedrin. He's asking about what? He noticed everybody else is jumping. You know, they were desperate for food. These are poor people who they're gathering stalks of wheat in order to not starve to death. You know, if I told you they're serving schnitzel in the lunchroom and there are 30 guys in the yeshiva but only 20 pieces of schnitzel, what do you think that would look like? You know, there'd be a little bit of pushing, jumping, grabbing. So Ruth is out in the field while everybody else is jumping and grabbing. She's bending down very dainty with her skirt, making sure nothing. And that's what Boaz noticed. So you see, she's inherently tznius. And then how does she go and propose marriage to Boaz? She goes down to the granary at midnight, alone with Boaz. The pattern that you find, and it's a pattern that you find elsewhere also. Moshe Rabbeinu is the most humble man in history. All of a sudden, he's got to deal with the most fame. And Pinchas, who comes from Aaron HaKohen, Aaron is the peace lover. And Pinchas is the guy who takes the sword and commits his grandson, who grew up with his grandfather, the peace-loving man, has to take, page 210, has to take the sword and commit the single most violent act that we find in Torah. The pattern is teaching us that this defining feature or the defining sign that you possess a certain trait is the ability to do the opposite when necessary. If you can't do the opposite when necessary, you don't possess the trait possesses you. If you're a kind person and a guy in the street stops you and says, hey brother, can you spare $10? I haven't had a meal in a couple of days. And he's got a rusty needle dangling out of his arm, and you give him the $10 because you can't say no. You're not a balcha, you're not a chesed, you're just a spineless softy. You can't say no. If you can't throw the negative influence out of your house, which is his son, he can't throw his son out of the house when he's told to by God because I have to, that's not a chesed. If you can't give in, even though you're the midah of din, and you're not willing to give in a little bit, that means you don't possess the midah possesses you. You haven't got the ability to be soft when you need to. The same thing when it comes to truth. Same thing when it comes to truth. If you can't bend the truth, told you the Gemara says, Kala Nova, what do you say? Fred gets engaged. You don't think much of the girl at all. It's your sister. Right? You don't think much of her at all. Last girl in the world you would marry. Your friend gets engaged. What are you supposed to say to him? Mazel tov. I don't know, what are you thinking, bro? No, that's not what you say. Your friend gets engaged. What you say to him is, wow, great choice, great girl, great girl. Why? Because he thinks she's a great girl. Now when he turns his back, you go, right? But when he's looking, you say mazel tov. Why? Because that's the ability to deceive means you possess the meter doesn't possess you. If you can't tell a lie when you have to, or veer off of the truth when you have to, like when your wife comes home and asks you, how do you like my new sweater? Like, listen, wow, yeah, wow. Right? You better be able to do that. If you say to your wife, oh, wow, what Salvation Army was clearing out their cellars over there? No, that's not a man of truth. It's a cruel person. So you find this pattern repeating, and that's what Tamar that's the test of Tamar. That's why she's the mother of the kings. Because she's got the ability, right now what I have to do is go stand at a crossroads like the complete opposite of my nature. To go against your nature, that determines that you're the king. You rule over yourself. Okay. Now, they finish with this story, then we go to Yosef and Mrs. Potiphar. And this is also going to bring us to one of the more, a concept that we all need to understand. Page 212. Yosef goes down to Egypt and Potiphar buys him, page 214. And Yosef is successful and everybody's just enchanted with Yosef. He's very handsome. And at a certain point, Mrs. Potiphar has noticed him. And in Pasuk, pick it up in the middle of the page. Yosef drops his guard. On Pasuk Vav, 7 lines from the top. Let's read the words inside. Vayazov kol asher lo biyad Yosef. Potiphar leaves his entire running of his, and he's a high official, so he's probably got a nice estate. He leaves it all in the hands of Yosef. Page 214, 7 lines from the top. V'lo yada ito me'uma. He didn't withhold anything from Yosef. Ki im halechem asher hu ochel. Only the bread that he consumes, which is a euphemism for his wife. That was the only thing that was off limits to Yosef, was Mr. Potiphar's wife. Vahi Yosef yefei toar v'yefei netmar. And Yosef was very handsome. How does he translate it? Handsome of form and handsome of appearance. He was a good-looking guy. Look at Rashi for a second on Pasuk Vav. Rashi says, it's the right column of Rashi, 3 lines from the top. If you find it, please show the person next to you. Vahi Yosef yefei toar. Says Rashi, Kevan shara atzma Moshe, when he saw himself ruling in Potiphar's house, Hischel ochel v'shoseh, started eating and drinking. Misalsel b'saro, and he was starting to style his hair. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shem said, Avicha misabel, your father's in a state of mourning. Ve'ata misalsel b'sarecha, and you're styling your hair. Ani megara b'chasadov, I'm going to incite the bear against you. The bear is Mrs. Potiphar. They're relentless. Bears are relentless. I think my brother, who was going to be a zoologist, told me it's probably the worst thing to be done is chased by a bear. There's not really nowhere you could go. We go up a tree, they could climb trees too. Get on the water, they could swim. When if a bear's chasing you, so first of all, it's your fault being anywhere near where there are bears, right? So that's your fault to begin with. But apparently, if a bear is chasing you, just lie still and play dead. You practice being dead because soon he's going to be dead anyway. So may as well practice. So there's nothing you can do against the bear. And the bears are tireless. They hibernate, and after they wake up from hibernation, they almost never sleep. She's relentless in pursuing him. But Rashi uses an expression here. Rashi says, when Yosef saw that he was ruling over the house of Potiphar, so he starts styling his hair. And he said he's worried about how he looks. This is why. So Yosef feels that he senses from the dreams that he's going to become a king. And remember, we spoke last time about it. This isn't Justin Trudeau, who that's all he does is style his hair. Now, we're talking about somebody who's planning on, he's got a reason why he's doing it. Justin Trudeau can't pull himself away from the mirror. Yosef he's got a reason over here, because he feels that he's going to be the king, and then we have that halacha that the king has to appear proper. But Rashi uses the expression moshel. He saw that he was ruling. And listen carefully. At a certain level, that means Yosef saw he ruled over his evil inclination. That means you're in Egypt, which is the den of iniquity. It's almost as bad as your average college campus. And Yosef he's in Egypt, and he seems to be in control. This is an area of life that you never drop your guard. Yosef drops his guard, boom, she plunges in. Then he gets attacked again. This is an area of life that one must always stay vigilant. So what happens? She turns her eyes to Yosef. Vatomer shichvay, she says, lay with me. Now, it's not clear if she said it or she said it with her eyes. Because it says she set her eyes on him and said, sleep with me. It's not clear if she said it verbally or she was saying it with her eyes, which is a way of protecting herself. If she's only saying it with her eyes, then she goes say, if anybody accuses her, she goes say, I didn't ever said it. So it's not clear. It sounds like she just went and said it. Look at his reaction. If you heard the Torah reading yesterday, how do you read the next word? Vayeishev. He refuses, like a chain. This is locked. No. Remember, all the way down and through. Could also be understood as a difficult refusal. Like that. On the other hand, it's teaching us how we deal. Look what he says. Vayemayne refuses. Vayomer Aleishas Adonav. Then he starts to explain. Hey, Adoni lo yadaiti ma babayis. He says, withhold anything. All he's withhold is you. But the first step is no. First, a flat out no. It's not going to happen. You want an explanation? I'll give you an explanation. The problem is if you start with explanations, then when you start with explanations, people try to pierce through it. That's a mistake women make. Mothers make this mistake all the time. Mommy, can I have a brownie? No, you can't have a brownie because we don't have any in the house. That's okay. They have some at the bakery down the block. No, but they're not good for you. But they are. That's okay. We had them yesterday and I'm fine. But it's going to ruin your appetite. No, I had them yesterday. I had plenty of appetite. And when you go to Dad, how does it work? Dad, could I? No. That's it. Game over. And mothers always give explanations. Kids break through explanations. So here, Yosef says, no. Now, you want an explanation? I'll give you an explanation. But if you start with an explanation, so then she may logic you out of it. So first, it's got to be no. This is non-negotiable. I've told you, but even with raising children, when my kids would ask me for something or want to do something, and the answer is no, I wouldn't. And they say why. I don't think that I ever said to my kids because I said so. I don't remember ever saying that. I've always been willing to explain to my kids why not. Maybe not right this minute, but I've always said, I'll explain it to you. Just realize that it's not negotiable. I've made a decision. That has to be clear. I'm the daddy. I make the decisions. You want to know why I don't want you to go bungee jumping? Because it's dangerous. You want to know why I don't want you to go alligator wrestling? Right? Because it's not a safe activity. That's why. You want to know why I don't allow you to buy a motorcycle? Because it's more dangerous than either of the other two. Yeah, there's always. I'll explain to you if you want to know why. But it may understand that it's not just because I'm explaining doesn't mean it's negotiable. Okay. So she chases him around. The Medrash says that her friends saw her. And her friends were wondering, they saw she wasn't looking well. She looked drained. They said, her name was Zuleika, by the way. That's the Medrash says that was her name. The Torah just calls her Mrs. Potiphar. And they said, Zuleika, why do you look exhausted, you're drained. She says, they sent this guy, my husband bought this Hebrew slave, the guy is so handsome, it's driving me nuts. They said, oh, come on, Zuleika, you're exaggerating, how good, I'm telling you, the guy is better looking, I can't, come on, give me a break, how good, you're exaggerating again. So what did she do? The man says she invited all her friends into the house, and she gave them vegetables with sharp knives to start peeling them. And then she called Yosef. She said, Yosef! And Yosef comes out. And the women were looking at him. They were so mesmerized by Yosef, they started cutting themselves and bleeding. She's a real sweet lady, this one, by the way. They started cutting themselves to the point that she was bleeding, that they're bleeding. That's how mesmerizing he was. And she's pursuing him day after day. And at a certain point, he comes home, and they're having a big celebration. There's a big a parade or a day of festivities, and she says, no, I'm not feeling well, I'm going to stay home. And then Yosef comes home. There's nobody around at the time. There's nobody around. Everybody's out on the street. And there are different opinions if Yosef went back to take care of business or he was actually on the verge of succumbing to that temptation. And look at Pasuk Yud Beis, top of page 216. Vatispeseu bevigdo lemor shichva imi. She grabs his garment, and again she says, lay with me. Vayazov bigda biyado vayanos v'yetzechuza. He leaves the garment in her hands and he runs outside. So, the commentaries say, I understand. Yosef is bigger than her and stronger than her. What'd you leave the garment by her for? She grabbed the garment out of her hand. You just rip it away from her. And the same question they asked by Yehuda and Tamar when he gives her the security. Why didn't you take it back? Good question, right? What do you say? Why didn't you just rip it out of her hands? Ramban says, because that's not right. It's not proper to go ripping things out of people's hands. I mean, do you understand the level of self-control over her? Now he's got the self-control to run away from her, to decline her advances. He's got the self-control to not even reactively grab it. And that's not right. He runs outside. So she raises a ruckus, and the master comes home, and she says, this guy, he tried to assault me, and the master throws him in jail. All right, think about, how do you feel if you're Yosef at this point? How would you feel if I'll get to you 1 second. How would you feel if you're Yosef at this point? You just withstood an unbelievable test. An unbelievable test. And how does Hashem reward you? You get tossed in the clink. And it's, by the way, it's not like an American prison where they have cable and, with 3 meals a day, and you got rights, and you get to talk to your lawyer. In Egypt, it's described as a pit. They throw you into the pit, into jail. No lawyer, no trial, no nothing. Imagine you're Yosef at this point. Like, what? Here I am. I did everything that I withstood a test that nobody's ever withstood. This is how I'm rewarded. Now I go into Egyptian jail. Yeah, question, good.
Rabbi said the Rambam said that the reason why Yosef didn't.
The Ramban. The Ramban says by Yehuda. The other commentators say by Yosef as well.
That he didn't rip out the garments back because it wasn't proper. Could it also be maybe in a sense it was like for a curse to talk to his master that he treated like he appointed him.
Could be the same idea. It could be, but they say that it's just not right. She's holding it. Rip it out of her hands. So, it even says in the Medrash, she started cuddling the garment. She just had such a crush on Yosef. At least she's got the garment. So now, the Yosef at this point, you can't blame him if maybe there's a little bit of a faith crisis. We'll see. But there's a Medrash. This is the main point I want to get to today. There's a remarkable Medrash here. The Medrash says a Roman noblewoman saw Rabbi Yossi. And she said to Rabbi Yossi, that story in the Torah about Yosef and Mrs. Potiphar. He's 17 years old. He's a hot-blooded male. He's in a den of iniquity called Egypt. What kind of fairy tales are you telling us that he ran away from Mrs. Potiphar? Give me a break. That's what she said to Rabbi Yossi. Oh, who are you trying to kid? I mean, can you imagine a kid, 17-year-old at the University of Arizona in July, being chased around? No, and he just runs away from all the pursuits. Oh, give me a break. Who are you trying to kid? So Rabbi Yossi says to her, well, let's take a look at the Chumash. And he opens up the Chumash and he says, hey, Ruvain. The Torah uses a very harsh expression when Ruvain mixed up the beds. The Torah says that Ruvain slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah. Right? Vayeishev is Bilhah. Meaning that he mixed Yaakov's beds around. Page 216. And the Torah then says he showed her Yehuda in the incident with Tamar, where the Torah refers to as a harlot. So he said to her, look, Reuven and Yehuda are adults, and they're under Yaakov's jurisdiction. If we're going to whitewash anything, we would whitewash for them. Yosef, who's a 17-year-old alone in Mitzrayim, if he stumbled, that's understandable. If they stumble, that's really that's kind of embarrassing. So if we would be whitewashing anything, we would whitewash Reuven and Yehuda, wouldn't we? Yet we didn't. So if we didn't whitewash for Yehuda and Reuven, if by Yosef, if we tell you he didn't do it, so it's not a whitewash. Yeah, obviously he didn't do it because we're not embarrassed to say it. If it happened, and say we got nothing to lose by saying it. Now, that's what Rabbi Yossi said to the Matronisa. And what that means is, and this is remarkable if you follow this through, pick out any name, pick a name in the Torah, any name, any famous name. Take a name, any name. Yaakov is criticized, A, because he was insensitive to Rachel, and he married 2 sisters. Pick another name. Who? Aaron is criticized for getting involved with the golden calf. Naphtali wasn't criticized. Okay, good. Good, Naphtali. Okay. If you take a look, I'm coming for you afterwards, Sexton. If you take a look from the beginning of the Torah, Adam Harishon sins, the golden calf with the fruit. Noach gets drunk. Avram Avinu says to God, "How do I know I'm going to inherit the land?" There was a lapse in his faith. Yitzchak was deceived by Esav. Yaakov marries 2 sisters, and if it's not criticized in the written Torah, they're criticized in the oral Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. Aaron got involved with the golden calf. Miriam spoke lashon hara. Pinchas later on in the Nach doesn't go where he's supposed to go to the prophet to meet the other prophet, whatever it was. At the end of the day, just about, if it's not Naphtali, not. Yeah, Saxton got me. Yeah, Naphtali, not. But at the end of the day, there's a pattern that emerges in Torah. If it happened, we'll tell you that it happened. We're not whitewashing. And that you could carry over to Gemara. Because sometimes when you're learning the Gemara will give you an answer. And the Gemara has a challenge on somebody. And he goes, well, the case is really this, that, and the other. You kind of roll your eyes and you think, oh, that's a stretch. Yeah, but the same Gemara will sometimes say tiyuvta derava tiyuvta, that they'll ask an unanswerable question and they'll have to back off. We're not embarrassed to say we don't know. We're not embarrassed to say we're wrong. So if somebody did something wrong, we admit. That's what we do every Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Every Yom Kippur we say, Hashem, we did something wrong. Say it every day. Slach lano avinu ki chatanu. We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. So the Torah is telling you that Yosef, what do they call? Yosef, if he would have done it, we would be the first to tell you that he did it. We got nothing. We're not embarrassed. Okay. Now, Yosef gets tossed into prison. So take a look at what happens. Yosef's in the prison, and even in prison, he finds favor in the eyes of the boss of the guy running the prison and puts Yosef in charge. Then the Torah says the butler and the baker messed up. The butler brought a drink to Paro, and there was a fly in the drink. And the baker brought a loaf of bread, a cake, and there was a stone in the cake. And Paro gets angry, and he throws him into the clink. Then take a look at page 218. Vayachalmu chalom shnehem, ish chalomo b'layla echad. 218, 4 lines on the top. They have a dream. Ish kepisron chalomo. Hamashke ve'ofer, the butler and the baker, shalamelch b'tzayim sh'asur v'veis asor. Vayovo aleim Yosef b'boker, so Yosef comes to them in the morning. Vayaros avinem zoafim, he saw that they were rattled. How does he aggrieved? Vayishal esarise Parsha ita b'mishmar beis adon avlemar madua peirechem roim hayom. Why are you in such a bad mood? You know, I every time I see this, I laugh. I mean, you're in an Egyptian prison. Hey guys, you know, Yosef's a morning person apparently. Yeah. Hi guys, we're in such a bad mood this morning. What you got a stairway to the stars over here? I mean, what are you in such a good mood about, kid? Why guys, why are you in such a bad mood? So you see that Yosef approaches 2 people. He sees they're in a bad mood. And Yosef is willing, he doesn't wait for them to come to him. You see that this act of kindness, you see somebody's in a bad mood, go try to help them out. Somebody looking down in the dumps, what's wrong? Maybe you want to talk about it. Maybe you got a problem. What can I help you out with something? Yosef approaches them, which obviously results in him becoming a king. So you don't know, the little actions, you just approach the guy, ask him what's happening. Why don't wait? He has to come to me. You see the guy looks down in the dumps, so he goes to the 2 guys. So they say, okay, listen, we had dreams. So he says, okay, tell me the dreams. So the first guy tells him, well, I was squeezing grape juice into Paro's cup. The second one says, I had a basket of baked goods stacked on my head, and the birds were eating out of the basket. So first he tells the butler, he says, in 3 days, Paro's going to take you out of prison, and he's going to put you back at your post as the butler, as the head butler. There are those that say whether he was the head butler, the guy in charge of all the butlers. He says, Paro's going to restore you to your post. The second guy saw that he interpreted the dream well. Now, how did he know? So the Medrash says each one dreamt the other guy's interpretation. So when he heard the interpretation, Yosef interpreted it. The butler who had the dream didn't know his own interpretation, but the baker knew the butler's interpretation. And it doesn't mean that he remembered it. Sometimes in life, you remember trying to think of somebody's name. I can't remember his name. Then you tell me, that's right. Now, I know it when it's right. Does that ever happen to you? Or sometimes with a tune. That's something even more annoying. I'm trying to think of the tune. And the worst thing is people try to help you think of the tune. What's that tune? And the guy goes, no. You're trying to think of the tune. And then when I hear it, then I know it. So each one dreamt the other one's interpretation. When Yosef said it, he said, ooh, that's right. So then he tells him his dream. He says, in 3 days you're going to be hung. Now the question is, why do you need both these guys? Why do you need both guys? Why isn't enough with the butler? Because two years down the line, the butler's going to mention him to Paro. Why do you need 2 dreamers in prison? What do you need 2 dreamers for? Well, 1 dreamer's enough. Why do you need 2 dreamers?
Witnesses?
What's that?
Witness?
Well, he's not going to be a witness because he's going to be dead. He's going to get hung. The answer is, number one, this idea of each one dreaming the other one to know that it's accurate. But even more than that, if there's only one guy, the butler comes over, Yosef says, in 3 days you're going to get out. Well, you got nothing to lose. Take a shot. And you happen to get lucky. But if you're in an Egyptian prison and the other second guy says, by you're going to be hanging you in 3 days. Most guys in an Egyptian prison where there's no real supervision, I'm not going to go get this guy upset. The fact that he's willing to go out on a limb and it's a negative interpretation, that shows that the first interpretation was a shot in the dark. He's obviously got something. And so they need both of them. That convinces the butler that, hey, he's good. The kid's good. So Yosef gives this interpretation, and sure enough, 3 days later, he tells the butler, now look at, this is a little puzzling. Take a look at the bottom of the page. He says to the butler, 5 lines from the bottom on 218. Everybody see that? 5 lines from the bottom. Be'od shloshes yamim yisa Paro es roshcha. In another 3 days, Paro is going to take you out. Ve'shivcha al kanecha, restore you to your post. V'nasata kos Paro biyodo kamishpat harishon shoyisa mashkeo. And you're going to return to your previous job. Ki im zechartani itcha, I want you to remember me. Kasher yasid yitav l'cha with Paro. Then do me a favor and mention me to Paro. V'yizkartani el Paro. Skip to the end of the story. 3 days later, he restores him to his post, and the baker is hung. And then look at the last pasuk in the Parsha. V'lo zachar Sarah Mashkim es Yosef ha'ishkacheu. Sarah Mashkim did not remember Yosef. Why? Rashi says, because Yosef had put his faith in him. I want to ask you a question. If you were in that situation, you interpret the guy's dream. Are you allowed to make rational effort to support yourself or help yourself in this world? What we call hishtadlus. Yosef is punished with 2 more years in prison because he has a faith lapse over here by asking the Sar HaMashkim to remember him to Paro. What did he do wrong? And why 2 years? I mean, aren't you allowed to? What's so terrible about asking a guy you did him a favor? Ask him. That's a normal human behavior. That's normal. Hishtadlus. Why are you punished for that? 2 more years, especially 2 more years. What's wrong with that? Good question, right?
Great question.
So there are those that say Yosef at his level shouldn't have relied on a human being. I don't know. They were shepherds. They worked as shepherds. They worked for a living. They weren't California street people. They worked for a living. So what would he do wrong over here? What did Yosef do wrong over here? He's punished. What's wrong? I asked you to do me a favor. So there are different approaches. The Chazon Ish says that, imagine being in prison with a Palestinian terrorist. You're in prison with a Palestinian terrorist. You interpret his dream. Then you ask him for a favor. I mean, listen, interpret his dream, not interpret his dream. Do you really think this is a guy who's going to pay you back, a Palestinian terrorist? To go and ask such a person is an act of desperation. The Egyptians hated him. They hated the Hebrews. To go and ask an Egyptian in prison is an act of desperation. That Yosef is beyond that. That's a faith. That's a drop in his level of bitachon. Don't go away. What are you getting desperate for? Number one. Number two, I think the Brisker Rav said, he asked him twice. He said, if you look at it, the way the pasuk says it, he said, "Zichartani v'hizkartani." He asked him twice. Remember me, please remember me. The second one is an act of desperation. Well, if the second one was an act of desperation, we retroactively see the first one as an act of desperation too, and therefore you get 2 years. There's a medrash I saw of the best explanation I've seen of all. Best explanation I've seen of all. He asked him, according to this medrash, there was nothing wrong with doing it. Nothing wrong with asking him at all. But when do you ask? What does Yosef say? It's 3 days before he's leaving. Had he asked him on the last day, that'll be perfectly acceptable. Nothing's happened. God hasn't got me out of here. It's the last day. He's leaving. Go ahead and ask him. Yosef preempted it by 2 days. It was 3 days before the guy got out. He said, do me a favor, when you get out, just remember me to Paro. By doing that, Yosef was as if he was saying, nothing's going to happen in the next 2 days. Oh, you don't believe something could happen in the next 2 days? You preempted it by 2 days. What's God's rate of punishment, which we see later in the Torah? The spies, how long were they in the land? 40 days. What did Jewish people get for that? 40 years. Hashem pays a year for a day. You preempted it by 2 days, you get 2 more years in prison. Preempted, you get 2 more years in prison. So Yosef over here, that's in other words, to go and ask the guy for a favor according to this approach, you could ask for a favor. But why are you asking now? If you're relying on him 3 days ahead of time, that means you don't believe anything else is going to happen in the next 2 days. There's your faith flaw, therefore he gets punished.
It's a bit harsh.
Which part? Well, we're talking about Yosef. Talk about Yosef. Remember, he's going to be a king for 80 years. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So being a king for 80 years, he's held to a very exacting standard. He's held to a very exacting standard. What we expected from Yosef is that we may not be on that level. Maybe you are. I'm not. But he's Yosef. So it is harsh. It is harsh. But when you're privilege goes with responsibility. The way it works. Okay. The Gemara says Hashem is very exacting with the righteous ones. Doesn't cut as much slack. For the more righteous you are, the less slack he cuts. He expects more from you. You see that with kids. You see that with students. You see that with a lot of things in life. Just happy they didn't get drunk. I expect to see better behavior. Okay, mincha.